Hey guys, it's Matthew here, and today I'm going to be talking about a new trend that I've been noticing in the watch industry that may or may not impact your future purchasing thoughts depending on what your preferences are. And of course, as always, if you guys like this video, please like and subscribe. It really helps us out and helps the channel grow, so I really do appreciate that. So I think it's safe to say that we're kind of like in this sort of vintage inspired situation right now with the market. Pretty much every single brand has some sort of a vintage inspired watch, and you see it almost everywhere. Like for example, one brand that I can think of immediately is Omega. They have the Omega Railmasters, which the modern version that they released has actually faux patina colored text, which is kind of controversial, but I think it actually looks really nice on the dial. And there's also even that Railmaster trilogy that they released, which I think looks really good as well. Another thing that I can think of is the Blancpain Air Command, really cool looking chronograph. And honestly, just look on Lange's website. They have an entire heritage collection dedicated to basically taking designs of the past and just simply remastering them for the future, and at an insanely affordable price. There's also the Mido limited edition decompression timer. I think they made I want to say it was 5,000, which for Mido, a brand that makes watches that average between $500 and $1,400 in price, that's a limited edition for them. Really cool looking watch, really funky colors, almost kind of like a pastel rainbow colors on the dial, which is really cool to me. And I'm from South Florida, so bright pastel colors are kind of like a stylish thing with South Florida. A lot of people don't realize this, but actually Rolex themselves, despite having a reputation for not chasing trends, actually did chase the vintage inspired trend. If you guys will remember, they just released the Oyster Perpetual line, or I guess you could say they kind of reinvigorated it with these really bright, vibrant colors. And you might be thinking, well, there's other brands that have done vibrant colors. I think Breitling has released some sports watches that have orange and yellow dials, so that's not exactly a very new, or that's not exactly a vintage thing. That's actually kind of a modern thing. But when you think about the historical context, Rolex actually released some really vibrant dial colors back a few decades ago called the Stella dial watches. And they're known as kind of like a limited production run of watches. They weren't made for that many years, but they look really nice and they go for pretty big prices. I mean, they're vintage watches, so of course they're all pre-owned, but they're really, really interesting, different watches that collectors go crazy for. And they kind of low-key took inspiration from those watches. And they even actually notably sued a company in California that was making Stella dial-esque sort of customized Rolex dials. So they basically customized dials. They got sued, Rolex won, so now that company, I think it's called the Californienne, is now just making Apple Watch straps. That gives you an example that Rolex literally sued a company so that way they could actually chase vintage inspired trends, even if it was from their own catalog. But then again, that's what all these other brands are doing. So if even Rolex is chasing after that particular sort of trend that's going on, then it is really strong, okay? So I think what's going on now is that there's a new sort of design element that is starting to hit the market. And if you are thinking about getting a watch, you might want to wait until you see what kind of creations that your favorite brand comes up with in this category that I'm about to mention. And that is Lume. But not just a little bit of Lume, a lot of Lume, Lume in ways that are really creative that you didn't think were even possible. One example that I can give you right off the bat is the Lange 1 Lumen. So basically, the moon phase and the date are both loomed completely, so except for the actual ink on the date. So it really has this really interesting look, and it also has a partially transparent dial, which gives it a really, really interesting vibe. Another thing that I can think of is the Montblanc Geosphere. So the Montblanc Geosphere is a watch that was released, I want to say the first one was released maybe about 4 or 5 years ago. And it actually has this dual time function. And with the dual time function on one of the subdials, it actually has all the continents pretty much printed onto the subdial in Lume, which looks really cool at nighttime. And it's really great that they actually integrated a very overly artistic and complicated way of doing a dual time with these loomed up continents. So I think it looks really cool. And it's also a sporty watch. It's not like one of those watches that's like so artsy in design that, like, you know, it's hard to tell if it's still kind of like a sports watch. I think any GMT is kind of a sports watch automatically. And there's no doubt that, you know, with the overall design of this watch, is still pretty much like a sports watch. But of course, I guess in certain situations, if you get like the blue dial variant, for example, you could kind of dress it up as well. So good to see that it's versatile and also is still kind of functional as a dual time watch. Another thing I can think of actually is the Bell & Ross full Lume. All right, so this is literally just a watch with a fully loomed up rubber strap and a fully loomed up dial. So this is like legit glow in the dark, just like over the top Lume, straight up. And interesting thing about this is that, I mean, I don't really think there are too many like full Lume dials I've ever seen. I remember, you know, a lot of the Timex weekender watches have like a little button or something like on them that you can actually like see the back light up. It's called Indiglo, but this is like just straight up Lume. Another thing that I can think of is this brand called Sarpaneva. Now they're actually an independent company. And to my knowledge, they don't really have that many employees, but they actually have some watches that have like pretty much like full Lume, but not like all one color. They actually like turn the dial into almost like a painting of sorts, and it kind of looks like stained glass or something like that. Actually looks really artistic. This is one of those times where a watch is, you know, not exactly a sports watch. It's kind of like a novelty, but I think his watches go for like about $3,000 to $5,000. So for like a novelty watch, I guess you could say that it's a pretty good value actually. I would say with all these things, you know, kind of kept in mind, I feel like this is going to just continue to proliferate. And the reason that I think it's going to continue to go on and on and on is because, you know, you actually, if you've ever been on like a watch Instagram page or something like that, there's always like, you know, talk about like, you know, like the Lume shots and stuff like that. Or if you see, for example, like on a review on YouTube, there's always like a Lume shot at the end of the video. And the reason for that is because Lume is actually like one of the specifications of a watch. I mean, you know, unless you like really like hardcore vintage inspired stuff that just doesn't have Lume, just to stay true to the originals, chances are you're going to want to have some Lume. It's just one of those kind of characteristics that everyone looks for in a watch, especially a sports watch, which is the most popular genre of watch right now, and will probably still be the most popular watch genre for quite a long time. So that being said, I feel like, you know, if you're kind of really into this sort of like, you know, creative Lume space, you know, it might be good to kind of look out for what your favorite brand is actually doing in terms of like kind of having their own creative interpretation. Because, you know, even though with the vintage inspired stuff, some people might say it's been a bit played out, but the reality is there still is a lot of variety even within these vintage inspired stuff. You know, you might have a cushion case, you might have sort of like a faded dial color pattern, you might have a tachymeter on the inside of the dial instead of the bezel. These are like these little minute things that people actually just prefer stylistically. And, you know, I mean, someone that loved the cushion case might not like tachymeter or even, you know, any sort of busy dial. So it really depends on your exact preferences, but I feel like this is something that's really going to be a big thing moving forward with the watch industry. And honestly, I can't wait to see what my favorite brands have to offer in the future with how they're going to integrate Lume. I think there's a lot of creativity to be utilized in this space. So now I'm going to do something that I surprisingly have not done in previous videos for whatever reason. I think it's because I'm pretty much almost always wearing the same watch, which is probably why I haven't done this. But I'm going to do a wristwatch check. This is a Glycine Airman 42 millimeter, steel bracelet, blue on the, I don't think you guys can see that, but blue on the bottom, black on the top. It's also called a Fume dial. I think it's a really cool sports watch for not too much money. So there, I've done the wristwatch check. I'm officially a watch YouTuber, and if anyone has any doubts, they have just been dissipated. So I just had to do that because I think some people might have just been like confused to why there's a watch YouTuber not doing a wristwatch check. So now it's been done. But anyway, I'd like to thank you guys for watching the video. Please like and subscribe if you like the video. It really does help us out. Until next time, guys, peace.
Wristwatch check. Why do you even do that anyways?
I'd say cut the camera, but he's the cameraman, so we're about to have a brawl right now.